The emergency alarm echoed through the empty corridors of Station Nexus 7. Council. Chair Velther rushed into the main assembly hall, her elongated limbs clicking against the metal floor. The massive chamber that usually housed representatives from 43 species now held only confused aliens staring at empty seats. Where are they? Velther demanded, her translator device struggling to keep pace with her panicked. Commander Crom stood at attention near the human delegation section. His thick armor plates shifted as he gestured to the vacant chairs. Gone, every single one. We checked their quarters, their offices, even their ships. Everything is empty. Silas, the trade minister, floated closer on crystalline wings. It's not just here. Reports are coming in from across council space. Every human colony, every station, every vessel. They're all abandoned. Velther felt her breathing accelerate. Humans had been part of the council for 200 years. They ran the maintenance systems, managed the complicated trade negotiations, and staffed half the military support divisions. They couldn't just vanish. When did this happen? She asked. Approximately 48 hours ago, Crom replied. We didn't notice immediately because their automated systems kept running. The life support, navigation, everything. It all kept working perfectly. Velther moved to the central console and pulled up the station logs. The last human signature appeared 2 days ago. After that, nothing. She expanded the search to include all council territories. The pattern repeated everywhere. Within a single 2-day window, every human had simply left. Did they leave any message? Any explanation? Velther asked. Crom nodded grimly. He activated a holographic display. A single text message appeared, stark and simple against the darkness of space. You never asked. You never listened. We're done asking permission. That was all. Velther stared at the words. Around her, other council members had gathered. The Aquilians whispered among themselves. The Threnody delegation chittered nervously. The crystalline observers simply watched in silence. This is absurd, said Thexner, the science advisor. His crystalline body refracted the light into rainbow patterns. They had obligations, treaties, contracts. Apparently, they don't care, Silas said quietly. Velther thought back to the last full council session, just 3 days ago. The humans had presented a proposal. She tried to remember the details. Something about equal representation? Voting rights? She had barely paid attention. The proposal had been rejected within minutes. Most council members hadn't even bothered to read it. She remembered Haiyan Wu, the human liaison. He had stood quietly after the vote, gathering his documents. She had expected him to argue, to protest as humans often did. Instead, he had simply looked around the chamber and said 4 words. Remember this moment. Then he had walked out. That was the last time anyone had seen him. Good riddance, muttered one of the Barvakian delegates. They were always causing problems, always questioning our decisions. A few other members nodded in agreement. The humans had been difficult sometimes. They asked too many questions. They wanted explanations for every policy. They pushed back against decisions they didn't agree with. Perhaps this is for the best, Velther found herself saying. We can finally run things efficiently without constant human interference. Crom looked at her skeptically, but said nothing. Over the next few days, the council began assessing the situation. Teams were sent to human facilities across council space. Every report came back the same. The facilities were clean, organized, and fully functional. Food was stored properly. Equipment was maintained. But not a single human remained. The strangest part was how deliberate it seemed. In one human quarters, investigators found a note on the wall that simply said, "Good luck." In another, someone had left a detailed maintenance schedule for the next 6 months. On a human-run mining station, The departing crew had even left instructions for feeding the station's collection of Earth plants. It wasn't angry. It wasn't vengeful. It was just done. Velther spent long hours reviewing historical records. She watched old council sessions, reading through human proposals that had been rejected. There were dozens of them. Requests for better working conditions. Proposals for equal voting rights. Suggestions for policy changes. Every single one had been dismissed or ignored. She found video of Jinho, a human engineer, explaining why certain systems needed special attention. These networks require intuitive problem solving, he had said. You can't just follow a manual. You have to understand the flow, the rhythm of the system. The crystalline engineers had laughed at him. Systems are logical, they had insisted. Everything follows rules. Jinho had tried to explain further, but no one had listened. Velther found another recording of Borm, a human military strategist. She had been presenting a defense plan for the frontier territories. The raiders don't follow your predicted patterns, Borm had said. They adapt. We need flexible response teams. The council had rejected her plan, implementing their own rigid defense protocol instead. There were hundreds of these moments. Humans speaking, humans explaining, humans warning. And every time, the council had dismissed them. Velther closed the files and looked around her empty office. Through the window, she could see the orbital docks. Human ships sat silent and dark. They would make excellent salvage for council species to claim. She told herself this was fine. The council was strong. They had survived for thousands of years before humans joined. They would adapt. But deep in her mind, a small voice whispered a question she didn't want to answer. What if the humans had been right? What if the council needed them more than anyone had realized? She pushed the thought away and returned to her work. The council had business to conduct. They would prove they didn't need humanity. They had to. 2 months had passed since the humans vanished. Velther stood in the engineering bay, watching technicians struggle with a malfunctioning power distributor. They had been working on it for 6 hours. Status? She asked. The lead crystalline engineer looked up from his console. His facets were dim with frustration. We've followed every diagnostic protocol. The problem should be fixed, but it keeps failing. Show me the logs. The engineer pulled up the maintenance history. Velther saw entries dating back years, most of them signed by Jinho. The human engineer had serviced this exact system dozens of times. His notes were brief and unhelpful. Adjusted flow compensation. Recalibrated resonance by feel. System stable by feel? What did that even mean? How could you calibrate something by feel? Try running the diagnostic again, Velther ordered. The engineer complied. The system showed green across all indicators. Then, 30 seconds later, it failed again. I don't understand, the engineer said. Everything tests perfectly. Velther left them to their work and headed to the command center. The problems were mounting. It had started small. A recycling system that kept jamming. A navigation array that drifted off calibration. A food synthesizer that produced terrible-tasting rations. Now the problems were bigger. Crom was waiting for her in the command center. His expression was grave. We've lost contact with Outpost 72. Lost contact? Velther felt her chest tighten. What happened? The Frontier Defense Network failed. Raiders hit the outpost before we could respond. By the time reinforcements arrived, the outpost was destroyed. Velther pulled up the defense grid display. The network was a masterpiece of coordination, linking hundreds of sensor stations and response teams across the frontier. It had been designed primarily by Borum and her team of human strategists. Why didn't the automated response trigger? It did, Crom said. But the response was wrong. The system deployed ships to the predicted attack vector based on historical raider patterns. The raiders attacked from a completely different angle. The predictions should be accurate. They were when humans were running the analysis. Our algorithms follow the patterns, but the raiders have changed their tactics. They're adapting. Velther remembered Barham's words from years ago. They adapt. We need flexible response teams. How many casualties? Velther asked quietly. 2,417. The number hit her like a physical blow. In 200 years of human participation in Council defense, they had never lost an outpost. Not one. Over the next few weeks, more cracks appeared. The trade routes began failing. Species that had peacefully exchanged goods for decades suddenly refused to negotiate with Council representatives. Velther sent her best diplomats, but they returned empty-handed. They say we're too rigid, Silas reported after one failed negotiation. They want flexibility in the contracts. They want special considerations for their cultural practices. They want someone who understands them. We have translators, Velther protested. They don't want translators. They want what the humans gave them, understanding. Velther reviewed the old trade agreements. She saw Taeyang's signature on most of them. The human diplomat had somehow managed to make dozens of species happy with the same basic deals. How had he done it? She read through his negotiation notes. They were frustratingly vague. Listened to their concerns. Found common ground. Made them feel heard. How is that a strategy? Where were the tactics? The leverage points? The pressure techniques? The Council's economy began to contract. Without the trade routes, essential goods couldn't move. Prices skyrocketed. Riots broke out on 3 colonies. Then the medical crisis hit. A plague swept through a mixed species colony. The disease jumped between species in ways that had never been observed before. Council doctors were baffled. Each species required different treatments. But the disease mutated too quickly for standard protocols. Thousands died in the first week. Velther found herself reading through Myung-hee's research files. The human xenobiologist had developed cross-species medical protocols. Her work had saved countless lives over the years. But her files were filled with intuitive leaps and experimental approaches that made no logical sense. Tried combining Threnody antibiotics with Aquilian antivirals in a 3:2 ratio. Shouldn't work based on molecular structure, but patient responded well. Theory: both species share ancient genetic markers that respond to similar treatments despite different evolutionary paths. The Council's doctors couldn't replicate her approach. They needed evidence, proof, controlled studies. By the time they developed proper protocols, another 5,000 had died. Velther stood in her office, surrounded by reports of failures. Every system that humans had touched was slowly breaking down. Not because the technology was failing, but because the Council couldn't operate it the way humans had. Nexner visited her office with more bad news. The database systems are corrupted. What do you mean corrupted? Not corrupted exactly. Deleted. Every human technical manual, every instruction guide, every training document. All gone. They must have erased them before they left. Velther felt numb. All of them? Every single one. We have the systems. We have the equipment. But we don't have the knowledge to maintain them properly. That evening, Velther accessed the archive of the final Council session. She watched Hyan Wu stand and gather his papers. She watched him look around the chamber at all the species who had just rejected humanity's proposal without discussion. She had barely noticed him at the time. Just another human upset about another rejected proposal. They would get over it like they always did. But now she saw something different in his posture. Not anger, not frustration, just exhaustion. The tiredness of someone who had tried everything and finally accepted failure. Remember this moment, he had said. Now she understood. He had been telling them, "This is when you lost us. This is when we decided to leave." She wanted to hate him for it, for abandoning the council, for taking all the knowledge with them, for letting people die rather than helping. But she couldn't, because deep down, she was beginning to understand. The humans hadn't abandoned the council. The council had driven them away, and now everyone was paying the price. 5 months after the humans left, the council was drowning in chaos. Velther barely slept anymore. Every hour brought new disasters. Today's emergency meeting was about the HFY War, which had erupted 3 days ago. 2 species that had been at peace for 80 years were now destroying each other's colonies. How did this happen? Velther demanded. Say less brought up a holographic display. The Impossible Treaty. That's what everyone called it. Taeyang negotiated it between the Vrex and Canthi 80 years ago. Everyone said it was impossible because these species had been enemies for centuries. But somehow he made it work. Surely we can remind them of the treaty terms? We tried. Both sides say the treaty is void because the human who guaranteed it is gone. They say Taeyang was the only one they trusted to enforce it fairly. Velther looked at the casualty reports. Already 30,000 dead. Fleet battles raged across disputed territories. Both sides were calling for council intervention, but neither would accept council peacekeepers. They want a human mediator, Crom said. Someone both sides can trust. We don't have humans anymore, Velther snapped. The war continued. The council could only watch. That same week, the medical crisis expanded. The plague had mutated again. It now affected 7 different species. Council doctors were making progress, but slowly. Too slowly. Velther reviewed Myung-hee's old reports. The human scientist had worked with over 30 species during her time with the council. She had somehow understood how different biologies interacted. Her notes showed incredible insight, but also something else. Compassion. Patient is scared. One note read. Explain treatment in simple terms. Held their appendage during the procedure. Recovery improved significantly after emotional support. Emotional support wasn't in the medical protocols. It wasn't scientific. Yet Myung-hee had made it part of every treatment. And her patients had survived at higher rates than anyone else's. The current doctors followed proper procedures. They administered correct dosages. They monitored vital signs. But they didn't understand why patients weren't responding as predicted. Another 20,000 died. Economic collapse accelerated. Without humans to negotiate, trade partnerships dissolved. The council tried to establish new agreements, but kept failing. Species that had worked with humans for decades now refused to work with the council directly. Why? Velther asked a Riftwalker, trade representative during a failed negotiation. The aliens' tentacles writhed in what their species used as a shrug. You people never understood us. The humans did. They learned our customs. They respected our traditions. They treated us like equals. We treat everyone equally. No, you treat everyone the same. That's different. Velther didn't understand the distinction. The council's infrastructure continued degrading. Systems that had run smoothly for decades now failed regularly. Engineers couldn't fix them because they couldn't think like humans. They followed logic, protocols, and procedures. But human-designed systems needed intuition. Crom led another expedition to search for humans. They scoured space beyond council territory. They found nothing. It was like humanity had simply vanished from the galaxy. Velther spent hours reviewing historical records. She found something disturbing. Human contributions had been systematically erased from official histories. The Frontier Defense Network was credited to a Borvakian admiral, with no mention of Borum's design work. The Impossible Treaty was attributed to the Council's diplomatic corps, with Taeyang's name appearing only in a footnote. She found a video from 15 years ago. Jinho had presented a revolutionary new power system to the council. His design was brilliant, innovative, and would have saved millions in energy costs. The council had thanked him politely and filed the proposal away. 6 months later, a crystalline engineer presented the exact same design. The council had approved it immediately and given the engineer a prestigious award. Jinho had never complained. He had simply continued working. Velther found dozens of similar cases. Human innovations credited to others. Human solutions implemented without acknowledgement. Human warnings ignored until disasters proved them right. She called an emergency council session. Not everyone attended. Several species had left the council entirely, seeking their own arrangements with whoever they could find. "We need to face the truth," Velther said to the assembled representatives. "We failed the humans. We used them. We took their work and gave nothing in return. And now we're paying the price. They abandoned us," Dexnet protested. "They had obligations, did we?" Velther countered. "Did we have obligations to them? Did we treat them with respect? Did we give them equal voice in decisions?" Silence filled the chamber. "I've reviewed every human proposal from the past 50 years, Velther continued. "Every single one was rejected or ignored. They asked for representation. We said no. They asked for recognition. We said no. They asked to be treated as equals. We said no. And when they finally left, we didn't even notice until it was too late. More silence." "They tried," Velther said quietly. "For 200 years, they tried. They worked hard. They solved our problems. They held our civilization together. And we treated them like servants, like tools to be used and forgotten." Crom stood. "What do you propose we do?" "We need to find them. Not to bring them back, but to apologize. To make amends. And if they refuse..." Velther looked around the half-empty chamber. "Then we deserve what we get." That night, she accessed the old security footage one more time. She watched the final council session. She watched human delegates sitting quietly in their section while their proposal was laughed down. She watched their faces. They weren't angry. They were tired, exhausted, done. She watched Hyan Wu stand and say his final words. "Remember this moment. This moment when we could have chosen differently," Velther thought. "This moment when we could have treated them as equals. This moment when we could have listened instead." They had laughed and the humans had walked away. Now the council's civilization was crumbling, and there was no one to blame but themselves. Veltherized a new expedition. A proper search with resources and ships. She would lead it personally. They would go beyond council space. They would find humanity, and she would do what she should have done years ago. She would listen. 8 months after humanity's departure, Velther's expedition finally found something. A faint energy signature in unclaimed space, using patterns consistent with human technology. They followed it for 3 days until they found a cluster of stations orbiting a yellow star. Human stations. "Hail them," Velther ordered. The response came quickly. A human face appeared on the view screen. A man middle-aged with tired eyes that held no hostility. Just wariness. "This is Dongjun, administrator of Haven Station. State your business." Velther stepped forward. "I am Council Chair Velther. We've been searching for humanity. We need to talk." Dongchun's expression didn't change. "Talk about what?" "About what happened. About the council. About everything." A long pause. "Permission to dock granted. May 7. Come alone, no weapons." Velther agreed. Crom insisted on accompanying her, but she could bring no other guards. They docked and were met by human security. The guards were polite but thorough in their scanning procedures. Dongjun waited in a simple conference room. Two other humans sat with him. One was a woman Velther recognized from old records as Sumin, a material scientist. The other was unfamiliar. "Sit," Dongjun said. "Not hostile, just matter-of-fact." Va Lithar said. She had prepared speeches, arguments, pleas. Now, facing these humans, the words felt hollow. "Why are you here?" Dongjun asked. "The council is falling apart," Velther said simply. "Without humans, our systems are failing. People are dying. Wars have started. We need help." "That sounds difficult," Dongjun said. His tone was sympathetic but distant, like someone hearing about a stranger's problems. "You could help us. You could come back." No, the refusal was immediate and final. "Please," Velther said. "I know we made mistakes. I know we didn't treat you fairly. But innocent people are suffering now. Doesn't that matter to you?" Dongjun leaned back. "Let me tell you a story. 20 years ago, I worked as an engineer on station Nexus 7. I designed a new waste recycling system that would save the council millions of credits. I presented it to the board. They thanked me and filed it away. 3 months later, a crystalline engineer presented my exact design. He got a promotion and a medal. I got nothing. When I complained, I was told to be grateful I had a job." He gestured to Su Min. "Tell them yours." Su Min spoke quietly. "I developed a new hull material. Stronger, lighter, cheaper to produce. I presented it to the council's materials division. They rejected it, saying it needed more testing. 5 years later, they started using it. My name appeared nowhere in the records. When I asked why, they said the documentation had been lost. We all have stories like that," Dongjun continued. "Every human who worked for the council. 200 years of being used, having our work stolen, our ideas dismissed, our voices ignored. We asked for respect. You gave us scraps. We asked for equality. You laughed at us." "I know," Velther said. "I've seen the records. I've reviewed everything. You're right. We treated you terribly. That's why I'm here. To apologize. To make things right. Make things right." Dongchun's voice held no anger, just weariness. "How? By giving us what we asked for?" "Why now? Because you need us. Not because we deserve it, but because you can't function without us." Velther had no answer. Crom spoke up. "What would you have had us do? Watch the council collapse? Let billions suffer?" "Yes," Dongjun said simply. "That's exactly what you expected us to do for 200 years. Work hard, accept mistreatment, watch our contributions stolen, and never complain because it's for the greater good. Now you understand how that feels. So you want revenge?" Velther asked. "No, we want independence. We want to build our own society where we're valued, where our children won't grow up as second-class citizens." Sumin gestured to a window. Outside, Velther could see multiple stations connected by transit tubes. Ships moved between them in organized patterns. Everything looked clean, efficient, thriving. "In 8 months, we've built this," Sumin said. 3 major stations, 2 colony worlds, a complete defense network, and trade relationships with 16 independent species. We did this without the council. We did this while the superior civilizations were falling apart. "Show her the rest," Dongjun said. Su-Min activated a holographic display. It showed technological schematics that made Velther's eyes widen. New propulsion systems, advanced weapons, medical technology far beyond what the council possessed. "How?" Velther breathed. "Because we were never the problem," Dongjun said. "We were always capable of this. But the council held us back. You gave us the boring jobs, the maintenance work, the tasks you didn't want to do. You never let us show what we could really achieve. Valther felt something break inside her. Pride, maybe. The assumption that the council was superior. The belief that humanity had needed them. We offer humanitarian aid, Dongjun said. Medical supplies for your plague. Technical consultants for your critical systems. Food shipments for your starving colonies. But we won't return. We won't rejoin the council. Why help at all? Crom asked. Because unlike you, we don't punish innocent people for their leaders' mistakes. Those people dying from the plague didn't vote to mistreat us. Those colonies starving didn't steal our work. They don't deserve to suffer. But they're suffering because of what we did, Valther said. Yes, that's the consequence of your choices. We're just making sure it doesn't become a genocide. We'll help keep people alive. But we won't save your civilization. You need to do that yourselves. Valther stood and walked to the window. Beyond the stations, she could see ships bearing human markings. Not council designs. Completely new, better than anything the council had. We were fools, she said quietly. Yes, Dongjun agreed. But maybe wise fools now. Take our aid. Use it to help your people. Then rebuild your council properly. Treat everyone equally. Actually listen when species speak. Be the civilization you always claim to be. And if we do? If we change? Would you consider rejoining? Dongjun shook his head. We're done being part of your council. But we could be partners. Equals. Independent societies working together by choice, not obligation. I'll propose it to the council. Don't propose it. Demand it. You're the chair. Act like one. The council failed because leaders like you let it fail. You saw the problems and did nothing. You knew we were mistreated and stayed silent. If you want to fix things, stop asking permission and start making changes. His words stung because they were true. Valther and Crom returned to their ship with cargo holds, full of medical supplies and technical assistance. But the real cargo was understanding that they had found humanity. But humanity didn't need them anymore. The question now was whether the council could learn to not need humanity or at least to stop taking them for granted. 1 year after humanity left, Valther stood in a very different council chamber. Only 18 species remained. 25 had left to seek their own arrangements with humanity or other independent nations. The Grand Assembly that once held 43 proud civilizations was now a shadow of itself, but it was honest. Valther addressed the assembled representatives. The vote is final. The constitutional reform passes. All member species now have equal representation. No more senior and junior members. No more first-class and second-class citizens. We are all equals, or we are nothing. Not everyone was happy. Silas had fought against the reforms, arguing for traditional hierarchy. But Silas was in the minority now. Most representatives had seen what pride and arrogance had cost them. Vexner stood to speak. I must formally apologize. On behalf of the Crystalline Collective, I acknowledge we dismissed human engineering insights as unscientific. We were wrong. We have incorporated human intuitive problem-solving methods into our training. Our systems now function at 85% of pre-departure efficiency. Other species made similar acknowledgments. The Threnody admitted they had stolen human agricultural techniques and claimed them as their own. The Aquilians confessed to blocking human proposals out of spite rather than logic. The Borvakians revealed they had actively suppressed human innovations to protect their own. Economic interests thought it was painful, humiliating, necessary. The chamber doors opened. A human entered, escorted by council security. He was young, professional, and carried himself with quiet confidence. This was Juan, humanity's first ambassador to the Reform Council. Not representative. Ambassador. a foreign diplomat from an independent nation. Ambassador Juan, Velther greeted him formally. "Welcome to the new council. We are honored by your presence." Juan nodded politely. "Thank you, Council Chair. I bring greetings from the Human Commonwealth." Human Commonwealth. They even had a new name now. "I'm here to formalize the partnership treaty," Juan continued. "My government has reviewed your constitutional reforms. We're impressed by your progress. Will humanity consider rejoining the council?" asked one hopeful representative. "No," Juan said simply. "That chapter is closed. But we're open to partnership. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchanges, scientific collaboration. We can work together as independent equals." Velther had expected this answer. It still hurt. "I have someone else to introduce," Juan said. "Admiral Young Mi, commander of the Commonwealth Defense Fleet." A woman entered the chamber. She wore a military uniform that bore no resemblance to old council designs. Behind her, through the window, Velther could see ships. Human warships. Dozens of them. Sleek, powerful, bristling with weapons far more advanced than council technology. Young Mi's message was clear without words. Humanity could defend itself now. They didn't need council protection. In fact, the council might need theirs. "The Commonwealth offers a mutual defense agreement," Young Mi said. "Our fleets will patrol border regions between our territories. We'll share intelligence on hostile forces. We'll coordinate responses to major threats. But our militaries remain independent." Crom studied the ships through the window. Impressive fleet. Those designs are completely new. "We've had an innovative year," Young Mi said with a slight smile. "The treaty negotiations took hours. Humans were fair but firm. Equal trade terms. No preferential treatment. Complete sovereignty for both sides." The old council would have balked at such equality. The new council had no choice but to accept. Finally, Velther and Juan stood together to sign the Compact of Sovereign Equals. The document explicitly stated that both the Council and the Human Commonwealth were independent nations of equal standing, bound only by mutual benefit and respect. As Velther signed, she thought about how far they had fallen. Once they had commanded. Now they negotiated. Once they had 43 species. Now they had 18. Once they had humans doing their difficult work. Now humans did it for themselves. But something else had changed too. The species that remained had chosen to stay. The reforms were real. The equality was genuine. For the first time, the council actually lived up to its ideals. After the signing, Velther met privately with Juan in her office. "I need to ask," she said. "Are you happy? Humanity, I mean. Was leaving worth it?" Juan considered the question. "We're building something that's ours. Where humans make decisions about human futures. Where our children grow up knowing they're valued. Yes, we're happy. Happier than we ever were here. I wish we had treated you better. I believe you. But wishing isn't enough. You needed to act when it mattered. You didn't." Velther pulled up an old file on her console. "I found something I want you to see." It was the video of Haiyan Wu's final words to the council. "Remember this moment." "I found him," Velther said. "He's retired now, living on one of your colony worlds. I sent him a message. An apology. He never responded. What did you expect?" "I don't know. Forgiveness, maybe?" Juan shook his head. "Forgiveness isn't something you earn by apologizing. It's something given freely, or not at all. Haiyan Wu and his generation lived their entire careers under council discrimination. They're done. They've moved on. Your apology doesn't change their past. Then why are you here? Why help us at all?" "Because I'm not Haiyan Wu's generation. I grew up in the Commonwealth, free and equal. I don't carry his pain. I can work with you, because I've never been hurt by you. But I'll never forget what you did to my parents' generation. And I'll make sure their sacrifices weren't wasted. Velther understood. The old generation couldn't forgive. The new generation could cooperate. But trust? That would take generations to rebuild. For what it's worth, Velther said, I am sorry. Truly sorry. I know, Juan said. That's why we're here. Why we're offering partnership. Because you've changed. Maybe not enough, maybe not fast enough, but you've changed. That's worth something. As Juan prepared to leave, Velther had one final question. Would things have been different? If we had approved that final proposal? If we had given you equal representation? Juan paused at the door. Maybe. Or maybe we would have stayed and remained unhappy. Sometimes people need to leave to discover their own worth. Maybe humanity needed to leave to become what we are now. And maybe the council needed to fall apart to rebuild properly. He left. Velther watched through her window as the human fleet departed. They moved in perfect formation, confident and strong. A nation that had found itself by walking away. She pulled up the old video one last time. Hien Wu standing in the council chamber. Remember this moment. She would. They all would. Not as a moment of human betrayal, but as the moment the council's arrogance finally caught up with them. The moment everything changed, the council would survive. It would rebuild. It would learn, but it would never again take anyone for granted. Because now they knew the cost, and they knew that some people, once pushed too far, would simply walk away and build something better. Humanity had done exactly that. And the galaxy was richer for it. Even if the council was poor, Velther returned to her work. There was much to do. A civilization to rebuild. Relationships to repair. Trust to earn. It would take years, decades, generations, but they would try, because that's what humanity had taught them. Sometimes trying, really trying, is what matters most.